Hi, my name is Eric and this is the Zafoos channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this awesome oak and acrylic accent light. So stick around. Before I jump in and just start a project, I like to do a little research and find a physical object that has a very close proximity to what I'm trying to create, at least size-wise. I find that this helps greatly in reducing the amount of waste and prototypes that I have to come up with along the way. So for this project, I have decided that I like this shape, the circular shape, and roughly the height. It's actually really close, I think, to the size of a Google Home Mini. And I think it'd look really nice if it had a little bit of segmentation in there. If we had an acrylic slice, which allowed light out, you could frost it with a little sandpaper, and made out of hardwood. Then just finish with a natural finish. And I kind of get my idea of what I want to do. I want to have a circular piece of acrylic maybe in here, and then a little heftier base. And the one other thing that always bothers me is with finished pieces, when it sits on a counter or on a desk and it is just wood on wood. I always think that it looks a lot nicer if you have a little bit of separation. So I know for sure that on the bottom, I'm going to want to put some kind of a thin membrane, maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, material that's a little inset that's going to allow me to create kind of a shadow around the base of the object. So now that I have a good idea of what I would like to get geometry-wise, at least in a rough sketch, I can take the size, the shape, and I can start looking through my wood stock, my materials that I currently have, and seeing what I can come up with to build with, and what do I have to go to the store and get. So this is the LED, and these are dirt cheap. They come about 16 feet for $8, and we're gonna use maybe 6 inches of this entire thing. So this is really a cost-effective option if you have a lot of projects using light, and it is so easy to work with, and you'll see it further in the video. Also gonna use a power supply, again, from Amazon. I came up with oak is gonna look really nice, and I think we're gonna stain it just a natural color. It'll just help bring out the grain color, grain structure on this red oak. The one thing that you want to bear in mind is if you're using a thin material like this 1/4 inch oak panel, you want to try and get it as flat as possible. You want to make sure as you pull them out that there is no big cups in the board. It'll simplify your glue up later on when you're putting this together. And then we're going to use some acrylic, and this is just 0.2 inch acrylic. So let's jump over to some design software, and we'll get the files set up for the CNC machine and for the laser cutter. So here we are in Carbide Create. A couple things to note. We have our stock set up. We added to the thickness. We added about 1/100th of an inch to the thickness. And the reason is we're cutting out on wasteboard, and instead of trying to sit there and deal with sanding and making tabs flush, we're just going to punch straight through. Have my retract height set to 2 millimeters. If you don't have a perfectly leveled machine and it's not in tram, you might want to increase this a little bit. The geometry in the file is very simple, just 3 concentric circles. The first, 3 1/4, this is just our cutout line, the exterior of our shape. The second is just inset by 1/8 of an inch, and this is our recess line. This is where we're going to recess the acrylic into. And the third is just a 1/2 inch back from that, and this is what we're going to use to create the pocket inside of the light itself, to hold the electronics, the LEDs, and the connections. The tool paths for the geometry are very simple. We have a pocketing operation for the electronics components. That drops down a 1/2 an inch. We have another pocketing operation for the acrylic recess. This is only dropping down 3/100ths of an inch, and that's only going to create a little shelf on the base and on the top for our acrylic to sit in. It's going to greatly simplify the glue up later. And then the final operation is just a cutout, and we're punching all the way through the material, and this way we don't have to worry about any tabs. Using a method like this, it's important to remember you're going to want to use a hold down method that's appropriate for it. So for this project, we're going to be using painter's tape and super glue. We can take a quick look at our simulation to make sure the file is set up correctly, turn off the tool paths and the rapids, and then we can kind of see what the final shape will be. So we can see we have our pocket, we have our recess, and then we have our final cutout. So now we just save out our G-code. Like the base, the top is just made up of concentric circles, but in this case there's only two. The first is the 3 1/4 and then the 1/8 inset. The one big thing to note is that we have changed the stock thickness. If we look at our tool paths, you can see just as on the base model, we're using an acrylic recess pocketing operation, which is only taking us down 3/100ths of an inch, and then a cutout. So once we have this saved out, we're ready to go to the CNC machine. Okay, and now we're going to set up the files for the laser cutter. We're in Lightburn, my preferred software for using with my laser cutter. Again, just like the CNC, this is going to be a very simple geometry. We have two circles. The first is 3 inches. That's the size of the light with 1/8 inch inset. And then we step back from there a 1/2 inch. We're going to be using a 100 watt CO2 laser today. So for the speed and the power settings, I have it set to 15 millimeters a second at 75% power. If you're wondering what settings to use on your laser, if you go over to the Zafoo's website, we have a list of power and speed settings that we've tested and should get you in the ballpark for starting out. We have our base and our lid CNC'd out. They're a little bit rough, but they'll be cleaned up with sandpaper. We have laser cut our piece of acrylic. Now this will be scuffed up on the outside face with a little bit of sandpaper. That's going to make it opaque, so that way we're not going to have direct light coming through, but it'll diffuse the light. For the base, for underneath the base to offset it from the surface, I first considered using this piece of cork. However, when I put the base on top of the cork and I looked at it, there was such a large gap between the bottom of the base and the table. I felt it just felt kind of unfinished or as a mistake. So then I changed to this piece of craft foam. I much prefer the look of this. The gap isn't as large. Now, I would strongly advise against cutting this on the laser cutter. Neoprene and a lot of synthetic foams contain chlorine. And when you vaporize them with a laser cutter, one, it damages the internals because chlorine is corrosive to metal. So it'll damage the internals of your laser cutter. And the second thing is it's dangerous. It can kill you. Okay, enough of the safety police. Now let's get back to getting this set up. So we're going to have to do some sanding on these pieces here. And you can see they're a little bit rough in here. So that's going to be our first step. Then we're going to buff up the piece of acrylic, cut the piece of foam to size, and then we're going to wire up, cut and wire up some of the LEDs with the power bar. We're going to set the piece of acrylic onto the foam and then use that as a template to cut it out. I think this is going to work great for our needs. So we'll have something along these lines. We have to sand up so that way we sit inside here, because right now we have an interference fit So let's get started with sanding. Okay, that looks nice and frosted. Now we've left the inside unscuffed. When we put this together, we'll dry fit it up before we glue it, and we'll see if we have too much light coming through, we'll come through and we'll scuff up the inside. But I don't think we're going to need to. I think that just having it on the outside will be plenty and it'll diffuse the light for us. We have to drill a hole that will accommodate this cord through the back here. Cut this right here, and then we will feed that through and then solder that onto the LED strip directly. So before we finish wiring this up, I want to get a little bit of finish on here. I'm going to use some Watco's Danish oil. This is a natural. It really will not affect the color of the wood. It'll bring out the grain a little bit more and it'll help protect it against finger marks. Okay, so we've let this dry for about 5 hours now, not the full 8, but it's very dry to the touch. Maybe a tiny bit oily still, but nothing that's going to bother me working with it. And we should be good. We shouldn't have any problems with this at all. So now we have both wires tinned. And what that means is we have a slight little cover of solder over each wire. We can then use our wire clippers and nip these down, because when I come down, all I'm going to do is put the red wire, the positive, on the positive point, just hit it, and then it should be attached. Do the same thing one more time. So this LED strip that I have here has a little adhesive backing to it. So I'm just going to grab it, pull this off, and then work our way around, just working our way around here and mounting that in. Once it's in place, it'll never be moved again, so it should be just fine. So I'm using this Loctite Go-To glue. It is way more durable than super glue, but it sets a lot slower. So you could use super glue for this just fine, but this is what I'm going to use. And I don't want to glob this on. I want a good amount, but I want a thin layer, thin coat. And we'll put the ring in place. And the reason we're applying it to the ring and not to the wood underside is, again, I want to keep it from squeezing out on the outside, which it could do. Try and, as best I can, line up the colors in the grain. We're going to leave this now for about 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. So the glue up's done. The only thing we did off camera was I added the foam backing to the accent light, and I have to say this thing turned out awesome. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment below. And if you would like any of the files for this project, you can find them on zafooz.com, and link is in the description. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications on new content. Also, jump on over to zafooz.com for project files and additional information. And until next time, remember, help make the change you want to see in this world.